Hi, HRN listeners. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary, and we have a really fun campaign and an ask for you. This 15th anniversary tour is aiming to bring you closer to unique food and music experiences in some of the most exciting cities in America. All the while, we're raising funds to support our work empowering the next generation of food systems storytellers through our fellowship programs. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and be entered into a raffle in the city of your choice to win a dinner for two at a noteworthy restaurant and tickets for two to a concert at a prominent local venue. We have incredible partners in New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Asheville, and Ardmore, Pennsylvania, who have donated a meal for two and two tickets to a concert of the winner's choice. And all donations help fund our fellowship programs, where we're helping to build essential workforce readiness skills and food system storytelling skills. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Hearst Ranch is a proud sponsor of the Heritage Radio Network. Learn more about Hearst Ranch at HearstRanch.com.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. It's Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. I'm Jimmy Carboni. I'm the host here on Beer Sessions Radio, and we'll be talking about sustainability in both the brewing and distilling industries with our guests. So let's go around the room, and each guest will introduce themselves. Let's start with Sean.
Hey, this is Sean Lawson at Lawson's Finest Liquids in Waitsfield, Vermont.
Welcome back, Sean. It's always great to have you on.
Great to be here, Jimmy.
Great, and a new favorite guest, Michael.
Hey, everybody. I'm Michael Kowalski. I'm the Director of Sales and Hospitality for Berkshire Mountain Distillers, located in Sheffield, Massachusetts.
All right. So I got an email recently from Lawson's. Sean, your team, you've been on quite a few times in the last year, and we've talked about new releases as well as with your wife about all the good work that you guys are doing. Now, this is something that we've covered in different areas, sustainability. You know, we've had on sail freight as a sustainable transport. We've had shows in the past about water use. But you guys are doing some pretty cool things. So just tell us what your project is, because I love it. I got a picture of it. And, you know, how you've evolved to that point and what sustainability is, you know, as a brewer. A lot of questions.
Yeah, great questions, Jimmy. Well, since the day started out in brewing back in 2008, thinking about our earth impact at Lawson's Finest, about how making beer is a pretty energy-intensive, water-intensive, resource-intensive use and industry, how can I minimize that impact? How can we collectively minimize that impact and do things in a way that support the longevity of both our operation and of the earth? So from the beginning, even as a very small brewer, was constantly looking for ways to conserve water or electricity or find innovative uses for the waste products. And so that has evolved into one of our social impact programs that we call Green is Grand. And that encompasses all of our conservation and sustainability efforts. The latest of which is our new solar canopy that we constructed last year. And we are doing a ribbon cutting and unveiling upcoming just next week on Earth Day. So to mark Earth Day, we're celebrating Vermont's largest freestanding solar rooftop canopy in Vermont. And so what this is a structure that we built over our 40 vehicle parking lot across the road from the brewery and tap room. And it provides us with, or will provide us with, once we've completed a full year of generation, about 240,000 kilowatt hours per year. So enough to power 22 households for an entire year, average use, or enough to give us about 50% of our electricity needs here at Lawson's Finest Liquids, both for the brewery, for all the operations that happen in the brewery, for the tap room, for our wastewater treatment, for all the site lighting, and anything that uses electricity on site here at Lawson's Finest. So we're pretty excited to unveil this canopy. It's a big investment for us in solar. And with our rooftop array up on top of the brewery, that'll get us to 60% solar powered overall. And what our hope is in the next couple of years, that we can continue to invest in solar and get us all the way to 100% electrical generated right here in Waitsfield, Vermont.
Wow.
Not an easy place to do it at almost the 45th degree latitude. Vermont's also a pretty gray state for a chunk of the year, but it's a sizable canopy. You get to look out over it from my office up here in the brewery, and it's a beautiful construction too. We added some additional wood to the steel to give it a nice Vermont timber frame style aesthetic. So it's pretty to look at, and it generates a lot of power, a lot of juice out there across the road.
Sean, just to take a step back, I mean, looking at the pictures, it's fascinating. You know, I'm used to seeing, you know, you see solar panels on rooftops. You see a lot of them as like solar farms. Is this a new idea, creating a parking roof? You know, what was the genesis of this project? Because I feel that, you know, there's so many breweries that can learn from this.
You know, you've probably seen them, the smaller sort of parking canopies where it's the size of like sort of a tracker, you know, maybe 16 by 20 feet sections that form a little bit of a shelter over a single row of parking spaces. And it's a good way to provide double use or dual utility for parking areas. So it's taken up as open space for vehicles, but putting up solar panels over it is a way to provide an added use for that space. This style canopy is a lot bigger than anything that I've seen in the past. And it covers the entire parking lot, like a clear span over the 40-space parking lot. And it was an idea that Sun Common, one of the premier solar companies here in Vermont, brought to us when we were looking at, okay, how can we generate more electricity here on site in Waitsfield, Vermont, and make our brewery greener?
Wow, man, that's a great intro, and I'm looking forward to. So you're having a launch for that next Friday, right?
Yeah, next Friday we've got some invited dignitaries, and we're going to be doing a ribbon cutting event, 10 a.m. On Friday, April 22nd, Earth Day. All are welcome, and it's going to be you know, right before the tap room opens up for the day. We're going to celebrate the you know, the inaugural kind of celebration of our solar canopy here in Waitsfield.
Wow, congratulations. And we're going to keep
Thank
talking
you.
about that in the show. Let's go to Michael. So Michael, you're at Berkshire Mountain Distilling in Massachusetts. You know, what are you guys doing that is we can add to the show? Sustainability and distilling in your operations.
Yeah, the beauty of kind of being one of the pioneers of kind of restarting distilling in all of Massachusetts and a lot of the Northeast is you had to start from scratch. And Chris basically had to start with scraps and finding every way he could, you know, partially to save money and to be able to put it back into the distillery. But Chris has always been an avid farmer and always been an avid supporter of the community. So in the forefront of his mind was not only how the distillery could give back to the area, but how the operation of the distillery could give back not only to the area, but to the earth. So everything from reusing our kind of spent grains in our farms, sometimes using our spent molasses for methane capture to actually produce more energy for a really cool farm, Pine Island farm, to really simple things like reusing the cardboard that we get from our glassware and repurposing them in our packaging materials. So literally from top to bottom, we have a really interesting way of kind of reutilizing materials that we have and making sure we're wasting not and wanting not.
Oh, you mentioned something about your trees, cherry trees on the property, and one of the whiskeys that you make.
Oh, absolutely. So part of the impetus for our New England corn whiskey was to find a way to repurpose a lot of the old cherry trees on our farm. It's a beautiful 100-acre farm planted mostly to apples and cherry trees. And when some of those cherry trees weren't producing, instead of just kind of raising them, getting rid of them, we decided to repurpose those trees. We milled them down and actually created our own casks so that way we could age that corn whiskey in it. Unfortunately, it meant we couldn't call it bourbon, but it also makes for a really nice story. And again, just another way that we're trying to be sustainable and utilize all the materials that nature gives us.
No, that's number one. I remember who did the Curious George soundtrack? Jack Johnson. One of his songs, "Reduce, Reuse, Recycle." It always sums it up for me. Sean, I bet you know that album, don't you?
I do, yes, sir.
Jack Johnson. So you guys, so Vermont. So when we talk about whatever it's New Green Deal or climate change, I do feel that talking to breweries is an important part of it, because you guys are definitely, I mean, you have costs, you're balancing all these things all the time. So, like, what were some of the early things you did at Lawson's Finest, related to trying to save money, reuse things, saving energy? You're not just doing it as a mission, you're actually doing it because it's also practical, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it starts with almost every brewery sends their spent grain. So there's a lot of barley that you use, or other grains that are used in the brewing process. And then at the end of brewing, you need to dispose of it somewhere. And so one of the best and highest uses for it is feeding it to animals. So from the beginning, I found a farm to work with, and I would actually haul it down in the back of my car when I was brewing on a 1-barrel system in like 20-gallon Rubbermaid cans. Try not to knock any of them over down to the farm. And the funny thing is that now, 14 years later, and a lot more scale, we've got a big trailer that we customized so that it could hold a little bit of liquid in the bottom, and it's easy for the farmer to dump out. And it's parked under our spent grain chute from the brewery here in Waitsfield, and he comes and picks it up every day that we brew and hauls it off to his beef cattle. And he's like, they love it. It's like candy. So it's a great reuse that closes the loop on the cycle. And puts it to good use. The other things that, even as a very small brewery, looked at were energy efficiency. So how can we install measures in the brewery or invest a little bit more in capital up front to save energy, create more efficiency, and over the long term, it saves money too. So it makes good business sense. So one great example is what's called a free air system. There's actually a company that was bought up that used to be called Free Air, based here in Vermont, and they designed these air exchange systems using controllers, fans, and ports in your walk-in cooler. So in a climate where it's below freezing for a big chunk of the year, we use the outside air to cool down the walk-in coolers and provide refrigeration for free, essentially. I mean, there's the cost of running a small fan, but it turns off the main evaporator fans, uses a small circulation fan, and then an intake and outtake fan. And we've applied that technology at each stage that we've grown to utilize that free cold air during the cold season. So that's one nice example of just saving energy. Another one from the early days is water and wastewater conservation. So it's a challenge for really any brewery, and I imagine distillery too, is there's a fair amount of wastewater that we produce. So for me, it was, how much of that can I side stream and divert? So the slurries and the wastewater that that contains a lot of solids like yeast and hops, or a little bit of grain, would side stream that, and that would go down to the farm as well, in totes. And the farmer would use it in his either in his manure pit, and it would get spread out as fertilizer out on the land, or it would go into one of his composting piles to provide a little bit more organic material and some liquid for the compost. So just a couple of small examples of where it started. And then as we've grown, we've continued to invest in equipment to increase efficiency, save energy, and over the long run, it pays for itself because it makes good business sense.
Wow, that's great. Definitely, I don't think people realize just how much water is used in all kinds of processing. I mean, forget leather and factories, but these days, almond milk and other food processing. I mean, I had on. I'm just curious for you, what's your ratio of water in to how much liquid beer goes out? Because I know there's like some kind of benchmark, isn't there, of what's considered good and what is wasteful?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what the latest up-to-date industry benchmark is for best practices. I do know that we are achieving an excellent water use to beer produced ratio. We're down to about 3.5 gallons of water used for every gallon of beer produced. And that's pretty low. I think, some breweries are as high as 9 or 10 ratio to 1. And I think one of the industry benchmarks is somewhere around 5 as a best practice, that if you achieve 5 to 1, you're doing really well.
So, like, what do you use water for in a brewery? Because, I mean, it's definitely important.
Cleaning is probably the biggest user of water that ends up as wastewater. But we installed in our newest brewery here in Waitsfield a clean-in-place system that recaptures as much of the cleaning water that uses chemicals as possible. Test it regularly to make sure the efficacy is still there, the pH is right. But that's one way we've been able to reduce our wastewater production. Some of it is absorbed into the grain. Some of it goes up the stack in steam, and of course the remainder ends up in the beer.
Yeah, I remember maybe it was 9 years ago. We interviewed the founders of Full Sail out of Oregon, and it was the first time we talked about the ratio, and they were talking about 4 to 1. Water in to beer out was really good. So it sounds like you're really at the top of it. Michael, back to this almond milk. I know you. I'm going to give you some props because you went to Culinary Institute of America. You've been a chef, sommelier, and all that. But I've heard that beer can be sustainable and a lot of food products. But I heard that almond milk, like some of these, I call them like wrongly processed foods. How much water does almond milk use? It's like 10 times the amount of almond milk that you get, right?
Yeah, it is some ridiculous number, like 10 or 15 to 1. And for me, the favorite stat for that is the fact that it actually takes more water to make almond milk than it does to keep cows and cattle hydrated to produce regular milk.
Wow.
Like that for me is mind blowing.
Yeah, no, that's why we're having this conversation, because it's going so deep. And back to Sean, I want to ask you, I love the specifics because I know you've as you evolve, you keep getting better, which is awesome. Including your beer. But you mentioned the spent grain dump truck. I know you always have this image of like my friend who's got brewers crackers. He was started off going through dumpsters of spent grain and baking small batches of crackers. You think about this dry stuff that you got to shovel out. So what is the spent grain dump truck, and why do you add water to it?
Oh, well, it comes out of the spent grain comes out of the lauter tun when we're done brewing, and it's still pretty wet. And so when it goes into a trailer, if it's not a watertight trailer, it it leaks out, and we're located here in Waitsfield right next to a wetland area. And so we didn't want that, that essentially what becomes, it's good stuff, but it's wastewater once it runs over the ground and picks up dirt and any other sort of contaminants that, oil or whatever's leaked out from cars and things going through the driveway here. And so we wanted to contain that. So we custom built a trailer. It's a standard trailer that goes behind a pickup truck, but it's got a good sized bin on it. And we customized the rear door so that it was sealed to contain the liquid. And then we welded in a 45-degree plate at that back end, so the farmer could just crank up the trailer. It's got a manual hydraulic piston, and he cranks up the trailer to dump out the grain when he hauls it over to the farm. It keeps the liquid in there, and it doesn't drain out on the ground and run into the wetlands here next to the brewery.
Wow. Hey, Michael, when you're at places like Culinary Institute of America, these leading, institutions for food and drink and everything, do they talk about this in the courses or in their practices?
For people studying culinary, maybe not so much, but the program that I went through is actually an amazing master's program, basically for beverage management and restaurant management. And when I studied out in Napa Valley, it was all about focusing on, sustainability for wine producers and, even for citrus and fruit production. So, you are educated and you do have those resources if you're curious. But, there can always be more of a focus on, teaching everybody, especially in the culinary world, where there can be a lot of waste if you're not, even maintaining your products properly, to really understand that, that piece of protein that you're using or those vegetables that you're using are coming from somewhere, and they need to be treated, properly. And, to make sure that you don't waste. I mean, there's an amazing chef by the name of Massimo Bottura out in Italy who has created this whole campaign just around, finding ways for the everyday person to maybe not waste as much from their cooking. So instead of kind of throwing out the tail of, the lettuce that you just cut, putting that in what they call a donor compost bin, where that compost and that piece of lettuce might actually grow something in that compost bin later on. All those little things can really make a big difference.
Yeah. Hey, Sean, let's talk about beer, because I know next Friday, what beer are we going to drink when you have the canopy opening?
I'm hoping it's going to be a sip of sunshine, because that sunshine is what's going to really help charge the entirety of that building. And I know for me, that's always been one of my favorite beers. When I used to work at a really high-end hotel up in the Adirondacks, I may or may not have made several trips over to Vermont to pick up some of that for our discerning customers.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the beers in our Sunshine family. You know it. So we've got our little sip. We've got our sip of sunshine. We've got our double sunshine, which is where the sunshine craze started at Lawson's Finest. And of course, I've got triple sunshine. So take your pick, Jimmy.
Well, I heard that there's a new one with ruby red grapefruit.
That's right. We've got it out right now. It's available for listeners all across the Northeast currently. We've got it out for March and April. It's our double sunshine with ruby red grapefruit. And this is an idea I came up with when I was down in Florida visiting with a small brewer, a place called Orchid Island Brewery down in Vero Beach. And when I met the owner and brewer there, we were talking about citrus-infused beers, and he struck up these friendships with some of the growers and the university nearby where they're growing experimental varieties. So he had his hands on some really cool different varieties of citrus. He sent me a bunch of pictures, and he helped us procure our first batch of ruby red grapefruit peel that's used in finishing the beer. And we infuse our original home run beer, Double Sunshine, with ruby red grapefruit. We use dried peel in the kettle. And then once it goes into the fermenter, we add some grapefruit puree. And then when it gets to the finished beer tank, we dose it for 24 hours with ruby red grapefruit peel to give it one more layer of aroma and beautiful, juicy grapefruit flavor. So super excited to share this with all of our fans and hopefully some new fans out there as well. Because we've never released the Double Sunshine beer outside of Vermont. This, of course, is a special version with the ruby red in it, but it's never been distributed across the 9 states of the Northeast where we currently have our other beers out.
So what about brewing with fruit? Have you made other beers with fruit before?
Yeah, we've done a series with our Space in Between. That's a beer that doesn't fit into any style neatly, which is why I called it the Space in between styles. It's kind of hazy. It's a little tart. It's brewed with a lot of oats and wheat, and we use some funky Southern Hemisphere hops in there. We've done a series that we're going through this year with passion fruit. Currently out is the blood orange, pineapple, and those are the 3 that we're releasing this year. We've done that beer fruited. And it's just a really nice compliment. My approach, Lawson's Finest, is pretty delicate. You know, some fruited beers are very heavy-handed or just over-the-top fruit in your face. I like to approach it with balance so that the fruit character is right there with the beer and works to complement the beer rather than overpowering it.
You know, for some of our home brewers, when you were just brewing small batch, did you ever brew with fruit at all back then?
Not in the beginning. It's more I would say in the last 5 years that I started playing around with fruited varieties of our beer.
And what are some pointers? Like, I mean, you mentioned the peel. I kind of understand that, but how does the peel impact the flavor?
It really adds a nice bit of juicy flavor profile because we add it cold. So we add it to the finished beer. And because it's a short contact time, it doesn't extract a lot of bitterness or astringency from the peel. And so that's one technique. Another technique is we use juice or puree when the beer is actively fermenting. For your home brewers out there, you want to get a juice that's been pasteurized or aseptically pasteurized. If you've aseptically packaged, geez, spit it out. Packaged so that if you're adding it on the cold side, you're not introducing any potential beer spoilage organisms to your beer. And then we use a little bit of dried peel in the kettle. On the hot side, that's going to add a little bit of flavor, but more of a, like, you get a little bit of astringency and citrus character out of it on that side. So I use those different techniques to layer in the fruit flavor in different ways.
Wow, that's nice. What about you, Michael? Have you been around any spirits with fruit peel, dried peel? I know in like Amaros, it's kind of standard.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for us, that's our Greylock gin in a nutshell right there. I mean, your top 3 botanicals in making a gin are the juniper, sure, and coriander, but it is always some sort of citrus peel. And it always has some really nice oils in it. So, you know, not only does it add some great flavor, but I'm sure Sean will also tell you that it also adds some mouthfeel and some nice body to whatever beverage you're making with it as well. And for us, I applaud Sean for really kind of getting out there and working with, you know, cool farmers and producers of fruits, because that's a really great way to kind of know where a lot of your ingredients are coming from, which is another part of sustainability, right? Being able to actually talk to some of these farmers and talk to where some of your materials are coming from, making sure that they're being kind of sourced properly and ethically, and then being able to utilize that product, which frankly is going to be a superior product to some of the other stuff that you're going to use. Like for us, we've actually made custom gins with some guys like Dan Barber from Blue Hill at Stone Barns. They've got a beautiful farm program out there. And we made a gin utilizing some of the really interesting ginger and turmeric rhizomes that they were making. So we use those as kind of the key flavor components for that custom gin that they use in their beverage program.
So what do you do with the ginger? I know what a rhizome is, ginger or turmeric. What are your steps? Are you putting that in the base?
Yeah, so for us, it's basically like the same way that you would make tea, where you basically have to steep that ingredient in a hot liquid, is kind of how we make essentially an extraction. I mean, fortunately for me, my background is also in chemistry and biology. I double majored at Case Western, and it's all about whether you can extract flavor in the ethanol phase or the polar phase, or the oils in like what they call a non-polar phase, and kind of knowing your ingredients that you're using on the whole to enhance other flavors. So one of the reasons our London Dry Gin, the Greylock Gin, is so delicious is we certainly, we use that citrus peel. We have the juniper that has some more earthy oils, but then we add like angelica root and orris root that we grow right there on the property, that add, again, that little bit of something extra, that those kind of earthy flavonoids that also help pull some of those beautiful oils and flavors from the citrus peel. So knowing your ingredients and knowing how they kind of work together is hugely important. And fortunately for us, we've got a 100-acre farm where we're growing a lot of our own botanicals for our gins. So we know where our ingredients are coming from. And we work with farmers, like our corn for our bourbon and our corn whiskey. A lot of it comes from a farmer 2 miles down the road that we see out for a beer every so often. And the rest of the grains that we're sourcing right now, for the most part, sourced from within like 25 to 30 miles of the distillery. So we're supporting our local farmers who are also kind of practicing sustainability on their farms. So it's an awesome feedback loop for us.
Great. Michael, with your Greylock Gin, with all those great botanicals, what's a custom drink that you would recommend to a bar or restaurant?
Ooh, for me, also being a sommelier, I'm a sucker for sparkling cocktails. So a French 75, you can never go wrong with. It's just, a sugar cube, some lemon juice, about 1.5 ounces of gin, and then you fill the rest of the flute with sparkling wine. Something that simple, but on a nice spring day, as we're moving into finally spring up here in the Northeast, it's my go-to drink.
Wow. All right, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes on Beer Sessions Radio.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Roberta's was founded in Bushwick in 2008 and has become one of the most iconic restaurants in the country. HRN made its home inside of Roberta's in 2009, and together they have become part of the DIY fabric of the neighborhood. Roberta's, the pizza restaurant, is open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week and serves much more than just the famous wood-fired pizzas. Their team dreams up new salads, pastas, and sandwiches on the regular. Roberta's Tiki Bar is alive and well in the back garden, serving up frozen drinks in the summer and hot toddies in the winter. Stop by the bakery and takeout spot next door for fresh breads, sticky buns, and pizzas to go. And of course, there's the 2 Michelin-starred Blanca tucked away in the garden for truly daring diners. But Roberta's also extends beyond Bushwick, with multiple locations in New York City and now in Los Angeles. You can also find their frozen pies in grocery stores around the country. The spirit of Roberta's, like Heritage Radio Network, is everywhere. Here's to many more years of pizza-powered radio. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Hearst Ranch is a proud sponsor of the Heritage Radio Network. The Hearst family has been raising cattle on the rich, sustainable native grasslands of California's Central Coast for over 150 years. Piedra Blanca Rancho in San Simeon is the original Hearst Ranch, founded by George Hearst in 1865. George's son was the famous publisher William Randolph Hearst. In addition to being known for building the iconic Hearst Castle, William was, like his father before him, an avid rancher. In his words, "I would rather spend a month at the ranch than any place in the world." Thanks to one of the largest land conservation easements in California history, a joint effort with the California Rangeland Trust, the American Land Conservancy, and the state of California, the working landscape at Hearst Ranch will be preserved forever. Learn more about Hearst Ranch at HearstRanch.com.
Hey, welcome back to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. Join us and become a member at heritageradionetwork.org/donate. Hey, Sean, so you've learned so much, and you talked a little bit about spent grain, energy efficiencies, solar power. Are we missing anything, or is it really about your focus? Because I know someone who just got an electric vehicle and they're trying it out as like a prototype to deliver. I mean, I don't know.
It's a holistic approach, and Michael brings up a couple of really great points, both from process, like talking about making the product, and how we look to source ingredients. In brewing, we use commodity ingredients often, that they're sourced globally, really. So wherever you can look to source your ingredients closer to home, it lowers your carbon footprint and the amount of energy it takes to get that ingredient to you. And even more importantly, forging relationships with the producers so you can know how they produce that ingredient, and are they applying sustainable practices themselves? Are they like-minded in terms of thinking about conserving resources? But the other point that Michael brought up is about using those local ingredients to infuse the finished product. And I just wanted to go back to the product for a second to say one of the keys that I think Michael would agree with is adding those botanicals and the peel of citrus to the finished, near finished liquids have alcohol in them. And so that was one of the important points of adding the peel at the very end of the process in making the beer that's citrus infused with fresh peel, is that you've got alcohol in there, and the alcohol helps extract those aromas, those volatile oils, and the mouthfeel and flavors from the peel. But pulling back for a second, Jimmy, to your question about, what are we missing? What's in the big picture? It's really trying to think holistically and taking a look at every aspect of the operation. So currently we're going through the process of hopefully becoming a B certified corporation. So looking at both our earth impact and our people impact, like how do we take care of our people and how do we take care of the earth in the way that we look at supply chain, how are we sourcing our ingredients? What are we doing on the other side with waste? And so it's really taking a holistic look at everything. So a few more examples of how you look at that holistically. Jimmy, you brought up, driving an e-vehicle. I think, converting as much as we can to electrical and powering that electrically from the sun is the way of the future for transportation and for other energy intensive use. Being able to store that sun power in batteries and then turn it on when we need to, so it doesn't always have to be when the sun is shining, is another key. And then bringing it back down locally. I have an EV myself. I love it, and it's got a lot of zip to it as well. But thinking about our business, we look at all those ingredients from sourcing the foods that we serve at the tap room, hyper local, working with as many local makers, local cheese makers, a local person that does charcuterie. We've got a guy up the road that makes all the pretzels that we serve. We make our own jams in-house to serve with the food. All of the food waste goes to the same farm where we send our spent grain, and it either goes into their compost or they feed it to the pigs, depending on the stock and the time of year. And then we look at other ways that we can reduce, reuse, recycle. So you think about all the waste that beer produce. So what about all the plastic? So, we use a lot of pallets. Every single one of them is wrapped with plastic shrink wrap. And so we have a local program with Casella here in Vermont where they've found an end use to recycle that plastic film. So we save all the plastic film, we save all the empty grain bags, and those go both back to recycling use. But better even yet is to reuse. And so the Vermont Brewers Association and a group that's called the Green Cohort here in Vermont, which is a group of breweries that are, trying to incorporate sustainability into everything they do. One of their efforts is reusing pack techs. So we're collecting pack techs, those plastic holders, the hard plastic on top of the beer cans, and we're reusing them. Our brewery can't reuse them we have a machine applicator. So if they're bent or slightly misshapen in any way, it will jam up the machine. But there are a lot of small breweries that are applying those applicators by hand or with a small mechanical applicator, that's operated manually. And so it'll work for them. And a lot of brewers are looking at that as a way to both reuse and save money. So a lot of different examples like that. And I think it's taking a holistic look at everything that we do to how can we reduce energy inputs? How can we reduce waste outputs? Because the climate crisis is real. It's upon us. It's going to take everybody doing something to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. Well, I will say I've got a bunch of those. Wait, what are those 4-pack tops called? Pack techs?
Pack techs.
Pack techs. I got a whole bin in my basement. And I think my wife was talking about using them for our kids' art project. But yeah, I always wonder about it. It's so much work and it's so important. I know, like, just when I had a small bar restaurant, it was like we used to try to recycle, and then we realized that our commercial hauler was really just taking everything and putting it in one truck. So there's so many steps involved. I think as a smaller business too, a lot of it's on you unless your suppliers and your waste carters are really playing it.
100%. If you don't do it, especially as a small business where you can't, invest in a company to come in and take care of that stuff for you, it's on you.
Yeah, I mean, it's even if you're in the city doing compost, it's like, where do you keep it? And you have to deal with rats too. So this is a really good conversation because it seems to be on the, there's ways to improve things. And I love that you talked about the batteries for solar power because, Sean, you seem to feel like there's a will, there's a way, and you keep working at it. Is that a good lesson for the rest of us?
I think so, and I think hopefully the commercial and industrial scale utilities. I'm seeing it here in Vermont. I know a couple of companies. A colleague of mine that owns a solar company, and they're doing a bunch of projects that are. They only work on utility scale projects, so big solar projects where they're putting in solar fields, and all of them have storage capacity associated with them, so that they could work like a small utility with larger businesses or with smaller utilities to make sun power, store it in the batteries, so use it when the sun is shining, but also have that backup storage capacity so you can turn it on when the sun is not shining. And it seems like that is one of the many parts of the solution to the future, because eventually, my ultimate goal at Lawson's Finest is to become net carbon zero. But how do you do that without replacing all the fossil fuels that are different parts of the inputs? I don't want to do it just on paper. How can we do it concretely?
Yeah, and as a brewer or as a distiller in Massachusetts, does the state play a role in this? Like, is Vermont taking the lead, or you're just working with the people that are taking the lead, Sean?
It tends to be working with the people that are taking the lead. The state of Vermont has some incentives for solar power. EV, you mentioned electric vehicles. There are incentives that the utility, Green Mountain Power, is offering for businesses that install EV chargers. And that was another part of the solar canopy I didn't mention, which is we installed a dozen EV chargers, level 2 chargers underneath the canopy that are part of the whole electrification program. And we provide those to the public free of charge because I want to encourage people to consider having electric vehicles and moving away from gas-powered vehicles. I think, in 10 years, most people are going to be driving electric vehicles.
Wow. Well, Michael, what about you? We mentioned some other industries like, everything's water intensive. I remember a couple years ago, there were some breweries in California, like Bear Republic, that I heard they were not, their municipalities would not approve them to expand because of just the lack of water. What about the wine industry? I know you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge thing in California. Actually, I know the guys over at Bear Republic really well, and actually they work with a distillery out there, Charbet, to make a beer whiskey like we do. Theirs is called the Racer 5. But yeah, water is the hottest commodity, especially in California. But even for us at the distillery, where I'm sure Sean and all of their equipment at Lawson's Finest is mostly steam jacketed to produce heat for your lauter tons. And for us, we find a way to take that steam heat and all of that liquid, and we actually push it into the distillery, and we use what's called cogeneration, where we're taking that heat that's water that's been heated to steam our lauter ton, and actually use it to heat the building. And our cooling water that we use to, again, bring that stuff down to temperature, we reuse that as irrigation in our greenhouses. So for us, it's all about the water, because at the end of the day, yes, energy is going to be a huge commodity, but so is water. It's one of our most important and scarcest resources on the earth. And I do have to give Sean a lot of props for putting in that solar generation, basically farm on your property. It is not easy to do, and it is not a small investment. It's something we've been looking into at the distillery, and it takes a commitment to make that actually happen. So again, kudos to you, Sean, on that.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that.
So this is exciting. I mean, like I said, we've talked about some of these things before, like just going through last year, like our friends at Hudson Valley Malt have been part of the sail freight, sending some malt down the Hudson River with Schooner Apollonia. And the e-vehicle is Valley Malt in Hadley, Mass. She just got an e-vehicle and posted it, and she was really proud of it. But there's so many stories like that. But yeah, it really is a state of day. Sean, last thing is energy efficiency. Like I've got I think a dishwasher. It takes forever, but it's supposed to be energy and water efficient. Does energy efficiency have to mean that like your performance suffers?
Not at all. No, when we built the brewery here in 2018, you asked about incentives or the state, and there were actually a lot of good incentives for installing the most energy efficient equipment when it comes to motors, compressors, and then your lighting. So lighting throughout our facilities, everything is LED lighting. It requires very little electricity. It performs really well. And then on the equipment side, using the very best, again, it costs more upfront. That's the hard part. But the investment in very efficient state-of-the-art equipment is that over time, if you've got the long view, if you can take 5 or 10 years for the payback, that extra added cost is going to give you savings beyond those first handful of years. And the state of Vermont and Efficiency Vermont offered incentives that helped out with making that decision to spend more, to be more capital intensive. One of the things Michael mentioned about recapturing the steam and using it in different ways reminded me of this little but cool, innovative feature in our brewery, and that is that we have a stack condenser. So on the kettle, we're boiling the wort, it's sending off all this waste heat, and we're not able to capture all of it, but why not capture as much as you can? And so we've got a stack condenser, and it's a series of pipes and coils inside the steam stack that vents to outside of the building, and what would just be waste heat is used to heat up water that goes into our big hot liquor tank, which is our hot water tank, and it preheats the water up to 200 degrees, and we use all of that water for both brewing and cleaning in the brewery. So it's one small way that we're trying to implement efficiency and recapture of energy at every step.
Wow, this has been really educational. Michael, do you have a question for Sean? Because I know you're a wealth of knowledge and one of my new favorite hospitality gurus. So thanks we're glad you got to talk to you a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, hey, I'm always happy to come on, Jimmy. You've got some great guests, and again, Sean here is no exception. I did want to give another shout out to Hudson Valley Malt and the Nestles. I grew up with one of their sons. They're an awesome company over there in Germantown. So it's great that you've talked with them as well, Jimmy. Some really great people. For Sean, I guess the obvious question is, when are you going to come hang out with us and participate in our Craft Brewers Whiskey Project? But aside of that, what have been some of the biggest challenges you guys have come into in terms of trying to be more, economically friendly and more sustainable? I mean, again, that canopy of yours is a huge step, and I wish, hopefully, it's going to happen for us in the next couple of years. But what advice would you give to somebody looking to help make their brewery more efficient?
Well, some of the challenges we've run into is when you look at the waste side is like, what do we do with this stuff? If there's not an outlet, if there's not a way to recycle a particular material, feeling kind of stuck. So that's one area. And it's great that there are a lot of innovative thinkers and a lot of people that are pushing on that front and collectively working on it, because I'll tell you, 5 years ago, there wasn't a system in place. There wasn't an easy way to, recycle the plastic film, to have a home for the grain bags, to, have a collective that's reusing the pack text. So we're making progress in that area. One of the other big challenges is we're in a rural area. So there's no municipal wastewater treatment plant here in Waitsfield. So we had to build our own. And that was, it was a huge investment for us to build a pretreatment plant. But it was the only way to make a small production brewery feasible. And it was really important for us to stay here in the Mad River Valley. We're really committed to this community. So that was a big hurdle for us, but thankfully we were able to pull off the financing and make it all happen. And then
that's huge.
And then we just got to get a date on the calendar, because I definitely want to come and sip some craft whiskey.
There you go. Hey, you're welcome anytime, and I'm happy to come up to you as well. I spend a lot of time up in your neck of the woods. We recently did a project with the guys at Long Trail and Otter Creek, Nick, who I'm sure I'm sure well. Right. So anytime, my friend.
Yeah, Sean, they did a great project where 6 years ago they distilled beer from 12 different breweries, and they've been releasing the last year 3 at a time of these specific whiskeys. In fact, the one you had 2 weeks ago, Michael, was the stout, right?
It was Long
stout.
Trails Unearthed. It was phenomenal stuff. And Nick, the brewer, good friends with our distiller, Michael Sherry, who is a wizard. So it's just a really fun way to collaborate and take an amazing beer and make it into a really fun kind of distilled spirit of the beer. Wow.
Well, last pitch, the canopy. What do you call it, Sean? Because I know it's got to have a name to it.
Yeah, we don't have a whimsical name for it yet. So I appreciate you providing the impetus to come up with one. But we just call it the solar canopy right now. But I think you've given me a challenge, and we got to come up with a shiny name for it.
Go back to
I will throw my hat in the ring and call
George
it
You do it, Michael. But go back to Curious George.
We'll throw a hat in the ring for the storer of sunshine.
Wow. Yeah, you might start naming beers after the canopy. Why not? It's cool. So, and the double sunshine. So, big shout out to Berkshire Mountain Distillers and their craft brewers whiskey project, which has been really cool. And I have a bottle of the Omegang Three Philosophers distilled whiskey ready to taste soon. And this Lawson Finest, the double sunshine ruby red grapefruit. I'm really excited to be partaking in that. And next Friday, if you're listening, April 22nd, head up to Waitsfield, Vermont, and you're gonna crack. Oh, what are you gonna do? You're gonna cut a ribbon?
Yeah, we got a giant ribbon to cut, and we're gonna celebrate, making electrons from sunshine.
All right. Well, thanks, Sean, always, and Michael. You guys, thanks for joining me here on Heritage Radio Network. Big shout out to our engineer, Armin Spengen, and our producing intern, Alex Tran. I'm Jimmy Carboni. We'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right. Woo, thank you.
Beer Sessions Radio is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like. Tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.